Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to draw and paint some pumpkins. So I'm going to start by using a watercolor pencil, and please don't mind the elephants upstairs. The girls have a play date and they're all running around upstairs. So there'll be some crashes probably, but nothing to worry about. I'm starting by putting an oval here on my watercolor paper, and I'm just using a Strathmore watercolor card. I'm putting another one back here, and I'm putting one over here. And the reference photo I'm using is over on my blog. I took this photo the other day at the Common Ground Fair, and if you want to see that photo, you can go check that out on my blog. Make this one a little bit bigger. And these pumpkins are called Porcelain doll, and they're really pretty. They really caught my eye. They're kind of like a pinkish color with like mint splotches on them. I thought they were just gorgeous. So now I'm making the second circle, kind of a little offset here in the center, and I'm going to put in a stem. I'm going to do one over here, a curved stem, and one over here kind of curving. Get that a little bit lower here and have that curving up like that. And I think I'm going to put some straw, because these were sitting kind of on a bed of straw with all sorts of other different varieties of pumpkins. So I thought I would just kind of throw that in here too with my watercolor pencils, since I have them out and ready to go. This is kind of like a yellow ochre color, or a raw sienna, any sort of like a tan, yellowy tan color will work just fine. Sorry if I'm a little stuffy. Season's changing and all, getting over that darn cold. And I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of green into these stems here. Alright, I also want to draw the kind of segments of the pumpkins here while I have my watercolor pencil out. It'll just be a little easier to do this now. Very chunky segments here. And give a nice stiff line here. Get that really defined bumpy look. They're definitely a lot more grooved than like a regular jack-o'-lantern pumpkin, which I thought looked really cool. And we're going to do the same back here. Wanted to do a quick little watercolor today. I've been really relaxing. I've been very busy these last couple of weeks with different videos and projects I was working on, and I've just felt the need to chill out a little bit. Do you guys ever get that? It's like, oh my gosh, I'm busy. So if I haven't responded to any emails or anything that you've sent this weekend, that is why. I'm probably gonna take it easy. My nephew's having his 6th birthday tomorrow, and I'm gonna go down and visit for that, go to that birthday party. I'm looking forward to it. Alright, so I've got basic sketch here, and now I'm going to use my watercolor paints. I am going to begin by using a number 10 round, and I am going to wet the background area, everything that's not the pumpkins. It's going to liquefy a little bit of my pencil, but since I sketched it in pretty intensely, pretty deeply, I guess, I really, put down some thick lines. It's going to dissolve some of the pigment, but then some of the pigment is going to stay right there and be fine. And I'm using just a regular synthetic nylon brush, because I don't want to have too much water on my brush, because I'm just working on a little watercolor card, not a big sheet. This is like 5 inches by 7 inches or so. I'm going to take a little ultramarine blue. I'm using Turner watercolors today, and I'm going to take a little burnt sienna and make myself a nice grayish color, and add that near the base of the pumpkins. And I might need to pause the video in just a second. I hear the water being run upstairs, so I know that the water pump is going to come on any moment. We'll go until that happens, and then I'm going to pause it. They'll give me a chance to cough and clear my throat too. Alright, I think I'm going to go ahead and add a little sap green in there while I'm at it. Oh, maybe it's not going to go off. Oh, there. That looks pretty in there with that brownish color. Kind of tone down the green a little bit. Now the end of your aquarelle brushes often have a scraper, and you can use that to kind of scrape some lighter shades into the background. As long as your paper is still a little bit wet, I can go ahead and scrape. Sometimes I'll get a darker line and sometimes I'll get a lighter one. It just depends if I'm scratching the surface or if I'm more pushing paint out of the way. So it kind of depends on how wet the paper is and at what point I'm scraping and if I'm scratching or if I'm pushing. So it's alright to get both kinds because you would have some lights and darks in there. Alright. You can also put some, oops, I'm pushing this out of the frame. You can also put some yellow ochre in there. So my Turner paints, I showed you these like a week ago. I'm going to show you my palette again. They didn't crack. They're actually still semi-moist. So that was kind of cool. I didn't know. It was a new paint to me, so I didn't know how it was going to do being dry in a palette. Some paints work great that way and others don't. So it's good to know those stayed semi-moist because they were a real deal at Jerry's Autorama. So I was kind of pleased with that. I'm going to just kind of, I feel like that's a little dark. Even though it's going to dry a little bit lighter, I still feel like it's a little too dark. So I'm just using a crumpled paper towel just to give it a little texture and to lighten it up a little bit. Okay, and I feel like I might need just a little bit more dark. I'm going to just do this with a little bit smaller of a brush so I don't get quite so much paint. Equal parts burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and I'm going right into these areas. Now this is the area which was ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, but it was way more brown, way more burnt sienna. So I just have a little bit more blue in the mix there to make it a little bit more dark. Beautiful weekend. I've had this nice sunny, crisp weather since yesterday. I hope tomorrow's a nice day too. My sister's renting a bounce house. Let's see, will I resist it this year? Every year I get in that bounce house and I am sore for a week. Last year I did every year. I don't know what it is. I just can't resist. I'll have whiplash for like 3 days. Lindsay needs to act her age. Alright, I'm going to pause it while the water pump does its thing and while this dries, and we'll be back in a second. Alright, the water pump has stopped. I did also lift out a little bit of that shadow back there after I dried it because it was just a little too dark. So if you have that situation, then you can do that too. Right here I have permanent scarlet, I have, which is like a cad red medium kind of. I have yellow ochre and I have turquoise, and I'm going to be using those for the pumpkin colors because they're very pale, pale pumpkin. And what I'm going to do is actually do an overall wash. I am just wetting. Actually, you know what? I think I'll move to like a smaller, stiffer brush. Let's see. Well, this one's stiffer. It's not really smaller, but just want to kind of scrub the edges a little bit to make sure they're nice and sharp. Sometimes when you're doing your background, things get a little out of control, especially when I'm doing a background. Don't be afraid to turn your work. I find that's a lot easier to attack the edges when I'm doing it like this. This is a juicier brush, so I'm just going to go add some water here. I'm still going to have those lines where I put where I use the, oh my gosh, somebody just turned the water on again upstairs. I might need to pause it in a second. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I've wet the pumpkin. I'm gonna mix a little bit of the scarlet and the yellow ochre to get kind of like a corally peach color, very light though, and I'm just gonna put that in my pumpkin. You don't want it to be pink. They kind of, when I looked at them, I thought, oh, that looks pink, because obviously next to all the other pumpkins it was kind of more of a pink, but it's not really a pink pumpkin. I'm gonna do a little bit of the blue and the yellow to make this kind of like a mint green, and I'm just gonna drop that in a couple places here. So pretty, so unique. I mean, it's just, you go to these country fairs and you just see some cool stuff. Oh my gosh, I saw a bookbinding lady and I was just like, okay, I need to change my life and make books for a living. I'm not going to do that, don't worry. But you know, sometimes you see something like that and you're like, oh my word, that's amazing. I'm so inspired. I have to go home and I have to try that right now. I actually went home and I knitted last night. Those of you guys that follow me on Instagram probably saw my wine and knitting pic I got some really cool yarn from a neighbor. She came across a really great sale and gave me a bunch of yarn and got me some. So I'm actually gonna make her something. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry and then I can add more detail. We're gonna do the same thing to these other pumpkins. I'm gonna go to this one next because it's not touching the other one, the one in the middle. So we kind of don't want everything just to kind of bleed together. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing. I'm gonna wet the area. It's okay if you wet over the stem a little bit because you don't want to have a gap between the color, like where the pumpkin and the stem are, and the stem color is going to be a little bit darker, so it will cover up what we do on the pumpkin because this isn't a really, really bright pumpkin. Okay, so, and I'm just, you know, making sure my edges are good. Gonna go in with that scarlet and the just a touch of that yellow ochre. If you had a lot of, like, though, if you used a lot of pigment when you drew it and you don't want to add the yellow ochre, if you think that makes it too orange, then by all means don't. You know, it's your painting. Yours might be a little bit different than mine. Your color pattern, like I was saying, this is the Turner paints, and you know, their colors are a little different than the colors I had in my other set of paints. So, you know, keep that in mind. Use your eyes rather than the names on your paints. Alright, so I've done that, and now I am going to go ahead and do this one. I don't think it's going to be a huge deal if the colors blend. I'm going to try not to go right up to that pumpkin when I'm wetting it, but it's not going to be a huge deal even if I do. I just blotted my brush off camera on the towel. We bought a batch of bath towels and they ended up not being very absorbent. I'm not sure why, because they're all cotton. I don't know why some towels are absorbent and some aren't. So anyways, we just got new towels, and so I brought those other ones that weren't absorbent downstairs, and I started cutting them up, and then I got lazy and I'm like, I'm just gonna tear these up, and I know I have like all these like stringy spider web stuff. That's what I was doing when the water pump was on. I've got like all this string from these towels. Oh, like you needed to know that, but I was just like, oh no. I guess blotting my brush on a paper towel made me think of that. And yeah, just keep adding your colors just like we have been. I love that turquoise and yellow ochre makes like a beautiful mint green. Isn't that kind of weird? You wouldn't think those two colors would make such a pretty green, but so you get that yellow ochre. Move it over so you can see a little bit of that turquoise. That's too much yellow ochre. Let's get a little more turquoise. It just makes such a pretty minty color. Almost aqua, a little more blue than aqua though, because if you added a brighter yellow, you'd get an aqua, but since you're using this yellow ochre, you get more of a subdued mint. And mint is a hard color to come by in watercolor unless you're getting like I know the Gansey Tambi has a mint in it, but it's also very opaque. So unless you get a mint without it being super opaque. All right, so now I'm gonna let this dry. Gonna pause it, and then we'll come back and we'll add our details and finish it up. Wait, before you dry it, I do want to show you this because I think it's going to save a little time. Go into the paper towel and just kind of blot, kind of like in a ring around the stem, and that's going to give you your highlights because that would be the roundest part of the pumpkin that's kind of up facing the sun. And you can do that while the paper is still damp. So do that before you dry it. Okay, so it should look kind of like that. Okay, now dry it. Okay, now I'm going to make some shadows here, and I'm going to see how my scarlet and ultramarine do for a shadow, because I've used both of those colors before. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the ultramarine blue and the scarlet, and we're going to see how that looks. I'm going to start it. I'm using a smaller brush as well. I'm just blotting it off just to make sure I don't get too much water. I do have too much water there, and that is not quite the right color I want. And a little burnt sienna into that. Alright, we'll try that again. Just if you touch your brush to a paper towel, it'll take out the extra moisture so that you can, so that you don't end up with like a puddle on your paper. So this is almost like a plum color that I'm using. What it actually makes is kind of like a plum. Kind of the deepest shadows that I'm putting in. Remember, it's more about the value rather than your color when you're doing this. And don't introduce any new colors at this stage of the game. Stick with the ones you've been using and mixes of the ones you've been using. and then it will automatically look like it belongs. Oops, somebody is sending me some sort of notification on my phone. Still not quite used to having a smartphone. It was really cool to take pictures at the Common Ground Fair. Actually, I did my blog post on my phone today. I'm just like, oh, I'm going to share these pictures that I took. It was quite easy. Can't do anything too fancy on it, though, I have to say. All right, now I'm taking a little bit of that. This is the kind of more of a gray mix made with the ultramarine and the burnt sienna, and I'm going in and adding more around the bottom of the stem there. I like to have colorful shadows. I liked having that kind of plummy color, so I might do a little bit more of that. Can add some. I do like that plummy. The plummy color is pretty. You play with colors. It's just a greeting card. That's what I love about these things. I buy them in a box by the 100, and then I can, you know, feel completely free to use them because they're not too precious. You know that, when we get our stuff that's too precious and we can't use it? You can soften your edges by just taking a damp brush. I actually like this bigger one for that. Clean it, make sure it's nice and clean, just lightly blot it so it's a little bit damp. So you can just kind of moisten the edges and drag the pigment out a little bit. It's more like used as a blending tool when you do this. I like to go in there, though I feel like those need to do a little softening there. It's like I don't want to cover up any of that pretty mint color. Alright, I gotta tip that and see how it looks. That looks a little red on that side, but I don't think it's a big deal. Alright, now we're going to move to the ones in the back. Something tells me this is going to be a longer video than I anticipated. I thought this would be like a 5-minute video. Look, we're going to paint some pumpkins. It's taken longer than I thought it would. So again, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and the scarlet. And I'm going in with these pumpkins back here. This time I'm going to try it with the bigger brush. We'll see how we do here. I think that was a little small. I think I should have used the bigger brush instead of the smaller one. Makes me, sometimes you fuss. You fuss around with those little brushes sometimes. That's not really even that little. It's a 5. Number 5, I think. Round. Go ahead and get some of those lovely purples in there. I keep wondering if I should put music in if I'm not talking that much, if I should put music in. It's two very different camps on that. Some people love it, some people hate it. I think as long as I can hear the person talking, you know, I don't mind the music as well. As long as it's not competing with what the person's saying. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Alright, I'm going to soften some of the edges, and I am going to need to deepen some of the bottom area. You just wiggle that wet brush around, the damp brush around, softening those edges, giving yourself a nice highlight. And let's see, a little more of the brown, a little more of the blue, a little more of the red. And there is the furnace. Let me just finish the shadow and then I'll pause it so we can let the furnace do its thing. Gotta love fall, right? It's starting to get cold out. We gotta have the furnace going. I haven't got the wood stove. I gotta get my chimney swept. I can get the wood stove going and hopefully lessen the amount of furnace noise. Alright, I'm gonna pause it. We'll be back in a minute when the furnace stops cooking. Okay, and this pumpkin back here does not have as much of a dark shadow. It's actually much more of a, you know, reddish brown in the shadow area. So I'm going to go in right there with burnt sienna. Oops, too much water in my brush there. And the scarlet to mix up a deeper mix of that. And actually, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. That's too big of a brush to get in there with. And look at that, see? But if that happens, just simply blot it out. Not a big deal. Gonna drag that up. A little bit cooler over there, and a little bit of turquoise over here. A little bit of that over here. And I'm just kind of looking at the picture, looking for the colors that I can see, and just adding them in as I go. And maybe a little bit more depth there. I got that burnt sienna, just grabbing it, a little bit of that ultramarine blue mix, that same brownie gray that we'd already made. I just keep going back into the same stuff. A little bit too much water there though. Okay, still starting a little bit of depth with a little shadow here at the bottom. I want to pull this one away from the pumpkin that's in front, basically. Okay, and then I think I'm also going to take a little bit of this yellow ochre with a little bit of turquoise, and just add a few little bits of straw, maybe a little bit of yellow ochre on its own here. We have some, oh, I could put a little sap green in there too. More little grasses, bits of straw. Right near the pumpkin, give them some place to nestle into here. And then we can start working on the stem. So I think maybe just pick up a little bit more of that yellow ochre and fill in the stem area. I'm just using it, I'm just kind of liquefying the pigment that we sketched it with on all three of the stems. And I think what I want to do is actually grab my pencil, one of these pencils here. What color do I want? I want a nice sharp one. This is a, what color is it? Burnt umber, so it's a nice dark brown. And I'm going to go in here and just add some details, some little shadow at the bottom here. So I'm just sketching right onto this wet paper. Now you only want to sketch on wet paper with a watercolor pencil when you want that texture and you're sure that's about all you're going to do with it. Because otherwise you're going to be stuck with lines that you might not want. This is what I want for this. And I'm going to turn this so I can get a nice comfortable angle here. I actually want to widen that stem out a little bit. And I think I want a little yellow ochre in that one. A little too much water on my brush. You have to watch out for that when you're working on a small piece like this. You don't have too much water on your brush. And I think I want a little sap green in those as well. And I'm going to look at this and see if I want to define any more, yeah, I think I do. I think I want my shadows a little bit darker. My goodness, I should turn my phone off before I begin filming. Oh, but you know what? It's the weekend, so, you know, you're going to get mom interruptions. You're going to get water pumps going on, furnaces going on. No such thing as quiet on the set on the weekend, but you guys probably know that already. I'm sure you definitely know it if you have kids. That's okay. Alright, and then I think I want to throw a few like grasses, and I don't think the yellow ochre is going to stand out, so I'm going to go with a sap green and just kind of maybe throw a few in front like that. I would like a little yellow ochre, so I'm going to do that too. A little bit thicker. And there you have your pumpkins. Let me dry it off. I'll show you when it's all dry, because sometimes things change like that. Those shadows there are not dry yet, and we'll see it all dry. Okay, I just wanted to do one more thing to this that I didn't that I want to show you because I didn't explain. I'm just going to throw a few more like straw pieces in front of this pumpkin too. just to, so it's not just kind of like hovering. Sometimes you just need to situate things, and there, yeah, you can hear the kids yelling. Okay. You know, never a dull moment or a quiet one on the weekend. That's all right though. It's funny, they're perfectly quiet till I come downstairs and it's like, Mom, we need something immediately. And just a couple little flicks there. All right, and then the other thing I wanted to do was just, I wanted to take this knife, and the stems kind of have this white highlight. You know how they just kind of a little bit textured and rough and white, just have this white area. I just want to get that kind of like rough texture on the stems, so I'm doing that. I'm just going to flip that around so I don't put my hand in wet paint. And there you have it. Again, the reference photo is on my blog, and I have lots of other painting tutorials on my YouTube channel if you want to do some more painting with me this weekend. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends on all your social media. That really, really helps my channel more than anything, and I appreciate it so much. And if you visit my blog and see the other photos I took, if you want a tutorial on one of the other ones, let me know and I'll see if I can make it happen. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.